The Alchemist has dropped 3 projects this year, and they all land in completely different worlds while still staying true to the Alchemist's usual boom bap style. So in this video I'm going to show you how to make beats from the different styles of these albums. Let's dive straight into it. So starting off with Better Than McDonald's, the beats on this are insane. Yeah, some really dusty, evil, dark, eerie boom bap beats. My sort of vibe, I love it. We want to find samples and use the parts of them that maybe wouldn't normally be used. The ugly parts, the bits that don't loop so well and are really sort of unsettling and weird and awkward almost. So to start off, we're going to use a drum loop, just something to play around with, something that sits underneath, and then we can do the drums afterwards. But if you want a good drum kit for these sort of boom bap loops, I'll put the link in the description. I use this all the time. This loop's at 83 BPM, but we're going to work at 77, just a little bit slower. And let's just take out some of the lows and highs. There's a lot of mid-range focus on this album, not just from the Alchemist beats, but Ono's as well. So let's just keep everything mid-range for now. And then we're going to add our own drums on top of this and maybe delete this, but for now it's just there. So now to find a sample, you want to go sample digging and find dark, eerie samples and use like the ugly bits from them. I've got these kits, The Crate Volume 1 to 6. You can get them from Reddit. Just go onto Google and search Reddit, The Crate. And the good thing is you can go in there and they've got some cool classic samples. So there's one I've already picked out. So it's got that perfect held down string, and if we pitch it down, I think you can imagine already we can do some cool stuff with it, like pitch it down heavily. You know, so automatically with the drums. Automatically, we just want to get it grungy, dirty, just detune it, and that will do half the job for you. Now, what I actually want to do is put this into Serato's sample, because then we can get it a bit more choppy and, you know, play around with it a bit more. So all I've done is import it into Serato's sample, detuned it a whole octave. So we're going to be working in A minor, but now it's a lot more grungier. And then I just click find samples and it automatically just, you know, finds the chops. So we don't want the chord progression from this because that's going to add more sort of soul and melody to this. We want to keep it one note. We're going to find just like the tail end of one of these chords. Whoa. EQ wise, obviously there's not a lot of low end information, but we'll just take out some of that lower bit so the bass can sit in there. Yeah, just a way to sort of jazz it up, that choppiness to it makes it more interesting instead of a held down note. Immediately we're going to go in and add the bass guitar because that's just going to fill out that low end. Then you've got most of the beat done before you start adding all the fun stuff. So we know we're in A minor, let's just literally play that note. It's starting to come along. Let's just actually do the drums, flesh them out, make them a bit better, and then we can move on to the fun part of adding a bunch of random shit to this. So I've loaded up a drum rack and I just need 3 sounds, literally a kick, hat and snare. I've got it from this same drum kit that I got the break from because they're really good sounds. And now we just layer the drums with that drum break, so probably be easier just to draw them in because we can match it to the hits. And we'll have to move some of the stuff off grid just to match that break. We want to keep that literally synchronized. So you can see that snare, if it's on grid, doesn't work. It has to be moved just like that. It can be a bit fiddly, but it's pretty simple to be fair. And then I've also just done the hi-hat, and I've not done it matching that break because the break you can hear has got fast hats. I find if I'm going to put in the same speed of hats, that it's just not going to sound right. So I prefer to do it slower unless I'm using like a sample. And you can see the velocities are important. I've had the kick and snare max velocity, except for these ghost note kicks. Just makes it sound more natural. And the hats, you see they're ducking whenever the kick and snare hats, just a little bit. And that makes it sound just a bit more realistic and humanized. So now we need to just fix it up a bit because like the snare, I don't like the snare from this one. So in fact, what I'm going to do is try kickstart, and we'll just sidechain to the snare from the drum rack. So that's one thing we can do. And in fact, I can just actually cut out the snare and put like a bit of noise there instead, like that. So now I've removed that snare and it's got the kickstart on it. So it's going to be just a bit more jumpy, but I really want to keep the sort of texture and the speed of the hats from this. So in fact, we're going to sort of EQ out a lot of the lows, a lot of the highs. On our drum rack, let's add a bit of processing just to dirty it up and make it fit a bit more with that actual break, make it sound like it's all together. At the moment, I'm really digging Sound Toys plugins. You can do so much cool stuff with them. And before I forget, we'll put a kickstart onto the bass so that it ducks whenever the kick hits from the drum rack. Now all together, this is what we got. So we've got the bedrock done, the foundation, it's sounding really good, really dark and ominous. Now we can add a bunch of random stuff to keep it interesting and evolving, just a bit more fun. The sample we used initially has an interesting bit in it that I think we could layer in at some parts. Just EQing out everything on this. It's off time, it's really bad frequency wise, like it's just really peaking in the worst place. That's what we want. We want that eeriness, you know? So I just added a bunch of audio tracks and let's just put on some like effects. Chuck in a little piano run. Just got to make sure that when you're adding in these melodic stabs and accents that you just pitch shift them so they match with the overall key. I'm not sure if that is in key. But then again, to be fair, if it's off key, that adds to the eeriness of it. That dissonance is actually a good thing. So for the next beat, we're going to take inspiration from Liquid Form, the EP that the Alchemist dropped like a month ago. And this one's very different, but at the same time quite similar to his other projects from this year. One of the interesting things is a couple of the tracks have these cool drum patterns that aren't typical. And at first you're going to listen to it and think that the time signature is off and it's not 4/4, but they are. So I've got the instrumental of Beat Like a Key, the track with 2 Chainz, and I've just pitched it down so that I don't get copyrighted, but just listen to the drum pattern. So you can see that snare, that second snare, which should be hitting here on the 4, is actually delayed, almost like a drill beat. So it sounds offbeat, it sounds like the rhythm is weird, but if you catch it and count to it, you'll find that it is still 4/4. But it's really interesting, it just changes things up, and I think it makes things sound darker and just more evil as well. So what I want to do is first build a drum pattern to match that, and then we can go into the sample digging and chopping as usual. And again, we're just going to draw in the notes to match the waveforms up above. And there's a kick that goes here, and you can see that ghost note kick is always like delayed to give it that boom bap bounce. So we can see here, this is where the snare is meant to hit. So if it was sounding normal, it would be like this. But instead, we're just going to move that over. So this is what our drums sound like. And in fact, let's just maybe add some RC20 just to grunge them up. Okay, so now we need to find a sample to go with this. If you don't know, Samplet is a really good website just to randomly flip through different samples. You can filter things as well. Let's just do random and find something we can use. I mean, Quincy Jones is so good. You could use anything he's made and sample it, and most of his stuff has been sampled, but yeah, I want to use this, so let's just download it. And what I like to do is just play the drums on loop and then just try to find the chops, just randomly press some keys, and you'll accidentally find some magic half the time. And we can also play around with the time stretch as well. That's really useful to just like stretch things out if the notes are like playing too short. And I want to add a bit more grit as well, especially because I'm thinking to keep the bass from this. And we will add a bass because while this has a little distortion, to get the mid-range up I had to take out some of the low end. So let's just do the exact same thing as last time, put in a bass guitar, keep it simple. So with the sample, you might find it like annoying at some bits because it's got, you know, some very specific frequencies that are a little bit grating at times. And that's where automation is your friend. You want to be able to filter stuff out and maybe just sweep out the higher end at some parts. I think automation is good because it keeps things moving, changing, so it feels like the sample is a lot longer than it actually is. Now we can just start adding in some random weird stuff, just make it interesting, you know? So I've got this Rhodes sample, which is just a stem from the Cymatics pack, and it's got some really cool like little trills in there that I want to find a way to incorporate more as a texture than anything. So it's obviously like subtle, like a lo-fi sound. It's got like a nice happy progression to it almost. If we EQ it correctly and chop it right, I think it can fit in and actually make our beat sound more eerie and darker. So we've got to take out a lot of that low mid-range information, because it's almost like we don't want the actual sound of the notes. We just want the actual twinkly bits of the notes, if that makes sense. I don't think it fits. I think it's quite bad. I'm going to make sure that I don't cut this out of the video, because you have to see that trying stuff is the way. You never know what's going to work. One thing that I do quite a lot in these boom bap beats is just add in some vinyl crackle. Just like that. So for the final beat, we're going to be taking inspiration from Spiral Suitcases, which came out early in the year. And this is a typical Larry June project, very mellow, a lot of drumless beats on there. So that's what we're going to try and do with this beat. So Alchemist has done a lot of drumless beats over the past few years. And a lot of the time, it doesn't mean that there's no drums. It just means that he only uses the drums from the sample and doesn't layer it in his own drums. I've got this pack of samples called Just Soul Samples. I'll put the link down below. I think it was pretty cheap to buy online. And I'm actually going to use a Freddie Gibbs Acapella. I just like making beats to Freddie Gibbs. He's got the sort of tone of voice and flow that I just like really dig. We've got this sample here, and what I'm actually going to do is just unsync it. We'll detune it a little bit, just as always, just the first thing I like to do. Let's go to find samples. So you hear that brush there. So when we chop up the sample, we can put that where we would put our own snare instead. So those are the drums from the track, so we can use parts of that. So what we can do is just move this marker. So we've got a kick now, and we can play it on time. And then when we do the second sample chop, there's no drums. So it just gives this really good contrast. It's always changing. It keeps a little bit of sense of rhythm so that it's easy to rap over as well. That's it. You don't have to add anything else. The only thing I'd really do is add some effects at some point, some filters, just to make it sound a bit more magical, or, you know, do a filter sweep when transitioning in and out. So let's just find the sample chops that we need. Just got to try a few different things here, and of course we can always go back into Serato sample and adjust some things if they're like not fitting. Loop that over twice, so we don't want it always changing. You want to have like some anchor points, so it has like a familiarity to it, and it's an actual progression that people can latch onto instead of just randomness all the time. play the acapella, see how it sounds.
Yeah, yeah, quarter thing to a whole thing, whole game working. Hit a bitch with that extended clip with that revolver shit, it serve the same purpose. Geek is beaming up the Scotty in my crack lobby, I can smell the cane burning. Michael Jordan, 1985, bitch, I travel with a cocaine circus. Put them F&X's on your clown ass, catch a nigga up and leave him down bad. I go get a pack and take a nigga town and fuck his bitches with my out-of-town ass.
And the way to test it as well is just throw on a drum loop and see if it fits.
Yeah, yeah, quarter thing to a whole thing, whole game working. Hit a bitch with that extended clip with that revolver shit, it serve the same purpose. Geek is beaming up the Scotty in my crack lobby, I can smell the cane burning. Michael Jordan, 1985, bitch, I travel with a cocaine.
So yeah, thanks for watching. If you want to check out my other Alchemist tutorials, check out these videos right here. Otherwise, peace out.
With my out-of-town ass, bomb on niggas like Nagasaki, rockin' next to my pocket, I like a body. Drop the check on the vet, man, these niggas be looking like baby mamas in these Maseratis. Bitch, I fuck up your face with a razor, I make sure your motherfucking family came through your body. Nigga dug in this shit, put my blood in this shit, break my finger, Alfredo Illuminati.